A social media star who murdered his family in 2017 will die for his crimes.
Anthony Milan Ross sentenced to death in Maricopa County Superior Court this morning. But the question is, when will justice be served here?
He had thousands of followers watching him live his best life. Vegan meals, weight loss, healthy living, a whole brand built around wellness. People looked at this man and saw inspiration. They saw discipline. They saw somebody who had figured it out. But Christmas morning 2017, that same man shot his wife, walked back inside, and killed his baby girl, then walked upstairs and killed his 11-year-old son. Let me tell you something. The people who perform peace the loudest are sometimes the most dangerous ones in the room. In every home, behind every closed door, there's a story waiting to be uncovered. Welcome to Dark Whispers, where we dive deep into the hidden truths of domestic crime and the relationships that turn deadly. If you're drawn to real stories, powerful insights, and the shadows most people avoid, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and step into the whispers they never wanted you to hear. Anthony Milan Ross was not a nobody. In Phoenix, Arizona, he was somebody. A vegan chef, a social media personality, the kind of man who could post a before and after weight loss video and have people in the comments calling him an inspiration. He built a following. He built a brand. And to the outside world, he looked like a man who had done the work and come out on the other side. His wife, Iris Ross, was right there beside him. And here is where the story gets real. Because while Anthony was out here playing celebrity, Iris was the one holding everything together financially. Her income, her money, her stability, that whole lifestyle he was performing online. Iris was funding it. Now, this is not just about money. This is about a man who had built his entire identity around an image that was not real. The vegan chef persona, the wellness brand, the social media fame. Prosecutors would later say it was all constructed. All of it propped up by a woman who eventually decided she had seen enough. In 2017, Iris filed for divorce. And that is the moment everything changed. When Iris filed those papers, she was not just ending a marriage. In Anthony Ross's mind, she was ending him, his funding, his platform, his whole carefully constructed image. Without Iris, none of it worked. And instead of figuring out how to stand on his own, this man spent the next 6 months building up something ugly inside himself. 6 months. That is how long passed between Iris filing for divorce and what happened on Christmas Day. 6 whole months where Anthony Ross was watching his life, the life he had built on her dime, start to slip away. His legal team would later argue he was struggling with depression and paranoia, that his mental health had deteriorated. And look, mental health is real, it matters, and it affects people in serious ways. But here is what the prosecution laid out, and what a jury ultimately believed. This was not a breakdown. This was a decision. Because what happened on December 25th, 2017, did not look like a man who had lost control. It looked like a man who had made a plan. Christmas Day, Phoenix, Arizona. Anthony Ross arranged to meet Iris outside their apartment, and the moment she was there, he shot her. Multiple times. Right there, outside, in the open, moving on. And I say that because the story does not stop there, and that is exactly what makes this so hard to sit with. After shooting Iris, Anthony Ross did not run. He did not panic. He walked back into that apartment. And inside that apartment was his 8-month-old daughter, Adora. He shot her too. Then, and this is the part that prosecutors leaned into heavily, because it speaks to exactly what kind of decision this was, he walked up a set of stairs to where his 11-year-old son Nigel was, and he shot Nigel. Make it make sense. Because there is no version of this story where what happened upstairs was an accident or a moment of chaos. He moved through that apartment with direction. He went to the baby, then he went up the stairs. A man in a mental health crisis does not navigate a crime scene like that. That is what prosecutors argued, and that is what the jury believed. After killing his entire family, Anthony Ross barricaded himself inside the apartment. For 6 hours he stayed in there, while outside, law enforcement waited. 6 hours with 3 people he had just taken from this world: his wife, his baby girl, his 11-year-old son. He finally surrendered. Narrator. When law enforcement finally got inside that apartment, what they found confirmed what anyone watching from outside had already feared. Iris was gone. Adora was gone. Nigel was gone. 3 people, 1 family, wiped out on a morning that was supposed to be about celebration. The investigation did not take long to build a picture of what had happened, because Anthony Ross had not really tried to hide anything. He was there. He surrendered. The weapon, the scene, the timeline. It all pointed in one direction. What investigators and prosecutors had to establish was not who did it. It was why. And more importantly, was this planned? And the answer to that question was going to determine whether Anthony Ross spent the rest of his life in prison, or whether the state of Arizona would take his life the same way he took his family's. Anyways, what prosecutors began pulling apart was the financial reality underneath the Ross household. Because when you follow the money in this case, the motive becomes very clear, very fast. Iris was the earner. Anthony was the spender. The social media lifestyle, the chef persona, the brand he was building. All of it ran on her income. When she filed for divorce, she was not just leaving a marriage. She was pulling the financial floor out from under a man who had no real floor of his own. That is the thread prosecutors followed all the way to trial. The defense, on the other hand, came in with a different argument entirely. Anthony Ross's attorneys said their client was not a calculated killer. They painted a picture of a man who had been suffering: depression, paranoia, deteriorating mental health. A man who had not been well for a long time and whose mind had fractured under the pressure of a collapsing marriage. Oh, so now he was sick. Now, after Iris and those children were in the ground, now the mental health narrative came forward. Iris's sister, Laura Sutherland, sat through every word of that defense, and she was not buying a single syllable of it. And look, courts take mental health defenses seriously. They have to. But what a jury has to weigh is whether the evidence supports a mind that was fractured beyond control, or a mind that was angry, resentful, and very much in control of every step it took. And what the prosecution kept coming back to was that sequence. Outside, back inside, the baby, up the stairs. Nigel. That is not chaos. That is movement with intention. Anthony Milan Ross was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. And when that trial got underway in Maricopa County Superior Court, the prosecution did not need to work very hard to establish what happened. The facts of Christmas Day 2017 were not in dispute. What was being argued was the state of mind behind them. Prosecutors held firm. This was premeditated. This was a man who had 6 months to sit with his anger, 6 months to watch his image and his financial security slip away, and who ultimately decided that if Iris was going to take that life from him, she was not going to have one either. And neither were the children she would have taken with her. The jury heard it all. The defense's mental health argument, the prosecution's premeditation case, the financial picture, the sequence of events inside that apartment. And in November, they came back with a verdict. Guilty. 3 counts of first-degree murder. But the case was not over. Because in Arizona, a first-degree murder conviction does not automatically mean death. the same jury that convicted Anthony Ross had to come back and decide his sentence. Life in prison, or death. That is a weight no jury wants to carry, but they carried it. Before the sentencing verdict was even read, something happened in that courtroom that told Laura Sutherland everything she needed to know. The jury sent the judge a question. They wanted to know, would it be possible for the defendant to stand when the sentence was being read? That was the moment Laura knew. Because you do not ask a man to stand for a life sentence. You ask him to stand when you are about to tell him he is going to die. The jury came back unanimous. Death by lethal injection. Anthony Milan Ross sat there and showed nothing. No reaction. No tears. Nothing. Meanwhile, in that same courtroom, at least one juror had tears streaming down their face. They had just sentenced a man to death. That is not something you walk away from unchanged. But every single one of them affirmed that verdict. 9 years. That is how long Laura Sutherland had been waiting for this day. 9 years of grief, of court dates, of sitting in rooms where her sister's name was attached to evidence numbers and case files. 9 years of watching a man who killed her family get to breathe, eat, sleep, and exist, while Iris, Nigel, and Adora did not get any of that. And when the sentence came down, Laura did not hold back. He deserves to die. He doesn't deserve to be on this. He doesn't deserve to breathe. I just wish they could do it sooner. I said what I said, and so did she.
Our William Pitts was in the courtroom this morning as former Phoenix chef Anthony Milan Ross was sentenced. Will joins us live from the courthouse now. Will, what happened today?
Yeah, Anthony Milan Ross didn't show any reaction to the verdict, but there were tears in the audience. I saw at least one juror that was crying. The hearing started with the jury asking a question. They wanted to know if it was possible for Milan Ross to stand while the verdict was read. The judge said that was not standard practice. The judge didn't make him stand. Now, Anthony Milan Ross was a local celebrity vegan chef. He was popular on social media, known for his weight loss and healthy lifestyle videos, but prosecutors say it was all a lie. They say he was obsessed with the idea of being a celebrity, and it was all funded with his wife's income. When she filed for divorce, prosecutors say he lost it. He shot and killed his wife, his 11-year-old son, and 8-month-old daughter on Christmas Day 2017. He spent 6 hours barricaded in the apartment before giving himself up, and his lawyers claimed he was suffering from mental health issues, depression, and paranoia. He was convicted in November of 3 counts of first-degree murder. Today, the same jury decided he should die for his crimes.
He had to think about what he was doing before he walked back in the house and killed the baby, and then walked up the set of stairs and killed Nigel. So he thought about what he did. So doing that, no, he deserves to die. He doesn't deserve to be on this, or he doesn't deserve to breathe. I just wish they could do it sooner.
Narrator. Here is the part nobody really wants to talk about, because a death sentence sounds like justice. It sounds final. It sounds like the story is over and the right side won. And maybe it is. But in Arizona, the road from a death sentence to an actual execution is not a short one. We are talking 20 to 25 years. That is the average. Anthony Milan Ross is 53 years old right now. Do the math. There is a very real possibility that this man dies of old age before the state ever gets around to carrying out that sentence. And while he sits on death row, eating, sleeping, filing appeal after appeal, Iris does not get to watch her children grow up. Nigel does not get to become a teenager, a young man, somebody's friend, somebody's future. Adora, who was only 8 months old, never even got the chance to walk. But hey, the jury did what they could with what the law gave them. Every single one of them affirmed that death verdict. One of them sat in that courtroom with tears running down his face and still raised his hand and said yes. That matters. That is not nothing. Laura Sutherland has been carrying this since 2017. 9 years of showing up. 9 years of sitting in courtrooms and hearing her sister reduced to case facts and exhibit numbers. 9 years of listening to a defense team explain away the deaths of 3 people she loved. And she came out on the other side of all of it, still standing, still speaking, still demanding that the people in that room understood exactly what was lost. That is not a small thing either. What this case keeps coming back to, and what it should stay with you about, is the image versus the reality. Anthony Ross spent years curating a version of himself for the world to consume. Healthy, disciplined, intentional, a man who had transformed himself. And people believed it because people want to believe in transformation. People want to root for the comeback story. But Iris knew what was underneath that image. She lived with it. And when she made the decision to stop living with it, to file those papers and take her life back, that decision cost her everything. That is the part that sits heavy. Because Iris did the right thing. She saw what her situation was, and she tried to get out. And the system that should have protected her in that window, those 6 months between the divorce filing and Christmas Day, did not catch what was coming. That is not an accusation. That is just the reality of how these cases unfold. The danger does not always announce itself loudly enough for anyone to intervene in time, and by the time it does, it is already too late. Nigel was 11 years old. He had a whole life ahead of him. Adora was 8 months old. She had barely started hers. And Iris, who had been holding that household together, who had been the real foundation underneath a man performing stability for strangers online, she deserved so much more than a parking lot on Christmas morning. This is why we tell these stories. Not to sensationalize, not to make content out of somebody's worst day, but because Iris Ross, Nigel Ross, and Adora Ross deserve to be more than a cold case file in a court document. They deserve to be remembered as people. As a mother, a son, and a daughter who should still be here. If you are in a relationship where something feels wrong, where the person beside you is more concerned with how things look than how they actually are, trust that feeling. Controlling behavior does not always look like bruises. Sometimes it looks like a man who has built his entire life around your resources and sees you as a threat the moment you try to take yourself back. Iris tried to take herself back, and she paid for it with her life. We are not going to let her story disappear into a headline.